So for all of you, we have started the recording now. Once again, for your privacy settings, if you don't want to be recorded, turn off your cameras and your microphone, but you can still send questions in the chat and it will be heard. All right, so today's session is about the capacity assessment, the knowledge management capacity assessment. It's about how you can go about knowing where you stand in knowledge management, what you're already doing in knowledge management, and sort of where this fits in. This is the second session of this knowledge management for beginners series. And in the first session, if you remember, like 2 weeks ago, we were going through the main definitions of knowledge management. We looked at some terminologies. We looked at the knowledge cycle. We also looked at the staff life cycle. And we also looked at the interaction between knowledge management and organizational learning, and how to integrate knowledge management in your organization. So I think that's one of the very important points we raised last time, that knowledge management should be integrated and it should not be an extra burden on your organization. We also took a brief look at how you would start knowledge management in your organizations, and we pointed out 2 different ways. So one would be the official way, and then the other one would be the guerrilla way, where sort of a small team or one person starts trying out things and then starts to spread the word and get more support for this. So those are the 2 different ways. And today we actually want to look at, so if you want to start this knowledge management, knowledge management, whether it's in the official way or in the guerrilla way, how can you know where you're standing? How do you know what your level is? And so if we can click to the next slide, Wesley, then we shall see today's agenda. And the first thing we want to look at is, why would you want to do a capacity assessment? And then we'll see what are the goals of it. So what are you getting out of doing a capacity assessment? What can you use it for? And we shall look at some options that are there for doing a capacity assessment. And finally, we will present a tool that we have developed under KNOW-HOW3000 together with Petra, Herout. And we will actually go into much detail on this tool because it's a tool that we shared with you. So you should have received it last Friday. And maybe some of you have already taken a look at it. Maybe you already have some questions. So there will be also time for you to ask your questions. And I will answer them as best as I can. So that's the rough overview of today's session and what we're going to get into. It will be a little bit intense in the beginning, so there'll be a lot of talking from me in the beginning. We shall see if we can ease it up a little bit with some questions and answers. But then afterwards, we shall try out the breakout room feature. I'll explain of how to go about it when we get there, but just so that you know, there'll be some talking that you are asked to do towards more of the second part of the session. All right, as you were all joining, I asked you to fill out a poll just to get an idea of where you are standing. And the question of the poll was whether you have ever systematically looked at how knowledge is handled, documented, and shared in your organization. It's basically the question of, have you ever done this kind of knowledge management capacity assessment or needs assessment? And the poll, for those who have not yet filled out the poll, you may find it at www.sli.do. So that's sli.do. And it's the event code 12965. Wesley, maybe we can type it in the chat again, please. So it's www.
But the same issue.
These are the things I hate them.
And then the event code.
Do you know I was sent to a cabinet to look for this now? Oh. The cabinet, I just looked in those files. To me, I just picked a file. I didn't even know that it was the one. But yes, these are the ones.
Can this Eliud handy please switch off, put off the microphone?
Okay, please always mute yourself. We are also always trying to have everyone on mute. It's just to make it easier so that there's not too much disturbance in the session. So please go to the poll, and maybe also we can switch our view to the poll, Wesley. We can open the browser window. You will just click on, you can, I think you can maybe press escape. Then you can see the browser window down, the Firefox. Yeah. Okay, all right. I'm seeing, Wesley, you might have to help me. How many percent no? I think we have quite a high percentage. It should be like 73% of no's, meaning a lot of you have not yet done a systematic assessment. So maybe all of you have already, or some of you have already looked at one thing or the other, like how we're sharing this or how we're handling that. But most of you say, okay, we've never done this in a systematic way. So that's honestly not too surprising, because I mean, we are in a knowledge management course for beginners. So it's normal that that's something that maybe you have not done, and I see the numbers are even going down. It is interesting though that some of you have done this already. So we have 23% to say, okay, we have done it systematically already. And I think that can be very interesting when we also go into the breakout rooms, or maybe even during the question and answers, you can also bring in that experience that you already have with systematically looking at your knowledge management. Yes, it is .do, please. So www.sli.do, and the code number is 12965. So it will prompt you to put in an event code, and that's the code number. Then the question should pop up immediately. Okay, I also see some answering in the chat. They have never done it, and I see the number of yeses are shrinking by the second. But let's see, can we see how many have started doing this already? I don't see it. I think it's maybe where that window is. Okay, we have 20 so far, yeah. So let's see. Okay. So let's wait a little bit that you all have the chance to cast your vote. You can't hear us, or you can't hear me. Okay, Wesley, can we check whether our microphone is working? There we are. Can I get a brief answer whether you can hear as well? Yes, you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So maybe the ones that didn't hear me, maybe it was a network issue. So yeah, perfect. Yeah, I think some are experiencing network issues. We still keep our fingers crossed that we won't experience network issues on this side. But let's see. So 25 people have cast their vote. And then the yes is really going low. So we have really an overwhelming majority saying that you have not really done this. So we will leave the poll open, so you can still cast your vote as we go along, and then we have sort of an overview at the very end of the session. But I think because we also started late, maybe we go into the session and this poll can stay open in the background. So Wesley, could you bring us back to the PowerPoint? Yes, and then full screen. Yes. Okay, so everybody should see our PowerPoint again. So Wesley, can you help me press to the next slide? And then one more slide. Yes. So the first question is, why would you want to do a capacity assessment? And if you look at this man, maybe it gives an idea. that doing a capacity assessment is to know where you stand and where you want to go, so that you don't find yourself in this position and this poor man here who somehow wandered along and then is completely lost. So it's important that to know where you want to go, but also to see where you are standing and what you are doing, and to figure out what is important for your organization. As we mentioned last time, knowledge management is a lot about integrating it into what you are already doing. And so it's important to know what you need to know and to know what you already have in place and what you are working with. And so capacity assessment is the starting point into a more strategic approach to knowledge management. So that's important to keep in mind. If you embark on a capacity assessment, you are already doing something to get a more strategic approach, right? Most of you have said, okay, we've not systematically looked at it, but doing so means, okay, you are moving towards that direction of having a more systematic approach. Now, if we can go to the next slide. What you can get out of doing a capacity assessment is that you can get an actionable view of the knowledge and capabilities of your organization. That is the level that your organization is at the present moment. So you evaluate your current situation. So you look at where are we exactly right now. And what you also do is you develop a common understanding of knowledge management, especially if you do this by getting in touch with all the staff that are in your organization, right? We will go into more detail as to how you do this or what tools you can use, but bringing in a lot of perspectives will be very helpful in having a broad understanding of what's going on. Everyone sees the reality with their own glasses, and so having different perspectives on that very same reality is very important. And that's important no matter which hierarchy level you find yourself at. And developing that common understanding of knowledge management is very important. I think you might remember how last time Petra pointed out that this knowledge cycle that we presented, there are names of how every step of the process is called, but that's how it's in the book. And it's fine for you to develop your own vocabulary, your own way of calling the things. But you will only achieve that if there's a common understanding and if everybody knows what you are meaning by which word. So that's why such an assessment can be very helpful to really know what you're talking about, because it will not just be the words, but they'll be connected to the activities that you are doing. Then another thing that you do with this capacity assessment is you identify your strengths and your weaknesses. I think it's probably quite obvious that this will come out, but it's very important to understand, okay, where are our strong points? And all of you basically mentioned that you are already doing something in knowledge management. So understanding what you are doing and how good you're doing it is very, very relevant. Just a briefing, I think some are not hearing me clearly. Yeah, I hope this gets a solution on our side. The microphone is on, so we are trying to make the volume higher, but I think we have somehow reached our limits. So yeah, maybe also cross-check with your devices, or maybe it's the internet and then we just have to wait. Yeah, so another thing that you get out of this knowledge assessment is that you identify the most pressing needs that you have. So that's something of how you do the assessment and what you try to take out of it. So identifying the most pressing needs will give you, will help you in then defining what to do and how to go about it. And you will also, with the results, you will also be able to look at what are the prioritized areas. So as I mentioned, you figure out what is important for you, and then you can prioritize accordingly. And then finally, with a capacity assessment, you get an input for a knowledge management strategy. So all of this gives you a sense of direction. So if you remember the first slide, right, the person who was a bit lost. So a capacity assessment gives you a direction. It gives you also maybe a map of what you want to do, where you want to go. And it doesn't have to be something that you only do once and then sort of you can tick the box and you're done with it, but it's something that you can reapply. So you can do it once and then you have sort of a baseline of where you can compare yourself against. So you can do it again maybe after a year or after 2 years, or maybe after you feel that we have really achieved something and we would like to know where do we actually stand now after we have done all of this. So that's something it can give you. And if, for instance, the same tool is used, it can also give you a chance to compare yourself to peer organizations, not in order to compete, but maybe in order to learn something of what they are doing. Let's look into the options of what you can do under a capacity assessment. Wesley, if you can help me click to the next slide, please. So, capacity assessments in knowledge management. There are very many different names and very many different designs. So you have consultancies and consultants who are specialized in knowledge management, and you really find a broad variety of it, and at very different design levels. So some are very intricate and very detailed. So there's sheets and sheets of Excel slides full of questions. And then there's other designs entirely that work with very open questions, and others work with ratings. And the consultants, of course, they come with their own design. Usually it's a trademark design. And that is something that you can do and you can hire. So you can hire a consultant to do that assessment for you, which has the advantage that, of course, you have someone very knowledgeable who comes in and who does this for you and who can then sort of present the results. But that's not the only way you can go about this. And given also that consultants usually take up a lot of resources, it can also be interesting to do a self-organized knowledge management capacity assessment. And when I say capacity assessment, it's also good to keep in mind that it can be called differently. So it can also be called a knowledge audit, it can be called a needs assessment. So as I said, there's a variety of names and designs, and that should not deter you from the fact of what it's really doing, and it is looking at where you are standing. And so the method you choose depends also on your organization and the resources you have available at that moment. And it's good to also keep in mind that maybe not every tool that you find will be suitable for your organization. So some are really very complicated and very detailed, and they might work, especially maybe in also very big organizations where all of this is necessary. So there is a difference between a smaller organization and how you would do knowledge management there, compared to maybe a large corporation working in very many different countries and having thousands and thousands of employees. So there are those differences that we also have to keep in mind in the knowledge management, and then also in the assessment of what do you really need. Now, the way these assessments are designed is either you have open questions or you have a rating. The rating meaning you have a description, and then you have, you can say, okay, yes, we agree with this description, or we don't agree, and then you sort of find out where you are standing. There's also what is called the maturity models, where you see sort of from a stage of being sort of a beginner to being an expert, to see how mature your organization is in its knowledge management. And what all these tools will have in common is that they look at specific factors. And so no matter the way, these factors include the following. So there's one, the focus on people. And if you remember last time we said knowledge is created by people, and knowledge management is really about people, about connecting people, it's about communication. So it's not really a surprise that the knowledge management capacity assessment really also looks at the people. And it looks in particular at the leadership. So what is the leadership doing? What is its role? How is it promoting it? It looks at the roles and responsibilities of everyone. So what roles do staff have? Do they have specific knowledge management tasks? Do they have responsibilities? And yes, I'm also seeing in the chat, knowledge management is KM knowledge management. It's just an acronym. So that's the first thing that all of them look at. So what are the people in the organization doing, and what roles and responsibilities do they have? Another thing that all of these tools of assessment will look at is the processes. Remember that cycle, the knowledge cycle that I showed last time, and there were the steps of identifying knowledge, creating knowledge, storing and sharing knowledge, and finally applying knowledge. And we also said, okay, sometimes these are called differently, sometimes there are more steps, there are more different verbs, but most of the times, all of this is something that you look at in the assessment. So how is this being done? What is in place? What processes are there that do particularly this? And another thing that the assessments will look at is the technology. So what technology is being used in doing the identification or the creation of knowledge, the sharing, etc. So what technologies are there? So it's one, maybe your software, but then also the hardware. It can also be the filing system you have. So anything really is under this broadly understood term of technology. Another thing that all the assessments will consider is the organizational culture. And last time we said that organizational culture is so very important in your knowledge management. If you remember the slide on the integrated knowledge management, you had at the very top level, the level 1, you had the organization, the leadership, and the organizational culture. And that one was so important, if you remember that saying, because culture eats strategy for breakfast. So meaning, if you don't look at the culture, you're missing out a crucial part, right? So understanding of how much is sharing encouraged, how much is the creation of knowledge encouraged, how much space is there for creativity and innovation is part of an assessment. And then finally, what also the assessments look at is the content or the output. So what comes out of your knowledge management? What reports are there? What success stories are there, etc., etc. So all those things that come out of your knowledge management. So that's broadly what the options that are there. I don't go into all the details of all these different options because that would take very long, and you can just maybe also do a quick Google to see what's out there. But what I instead want to do is to introduce you to the tool that I shared last week, because that's something that we have developed here, and that's something that we can also very readily give support on. So Wesley, if you could help me move to the next slide, please. So this is what it looks like for all of those of you who have opened the document. You have found this one there. I have to say it is still under development, so we have designed this based on a capacity assessment tool from an INGO network, so international NGO network, and we have adapted it a little bit to suit better our context and purposes. It is a tool for self-assessment, and we thought it's good to have a self-assessment tool because maybe not always will there be the availability of support, or maybe the resources for a consultant are not there, and it's really also giving that power and that ability to take charge of the knowledge management. And it's important to know, okay, you can do this. It is a tool that will help you do this, but you can do it, and it's doing this already can create an interest. It can create motivation in your staff for knowledge management. And as I said, it's very helpful to have everybody come in and share their perspectives. So that's why this is a tool for self-assessment. It has all the explanations that I'm giving. It has it in the document. But let me walk through it step by step, and then we shall see where questions are coming up. So first of all, this design that we have chosen, this capacity assessment, is sort of a maturity model because we can go from level 1 to level 5. So we have a total of 9 knowledge management areas, or KM areas. So for each of this knowledge management area, and I will go into detail of each of one of them in a second. So for each of these areas, you have a level 1, which is the beginner, and then, or the novice, and then you have a level 5, which is the expert. And then you have the intermediate and the learner and the advanced in between. And each of these levels has a description. And so how you can use this tool is you look at the description and then you see, does that somehow fit to what we are seeing in our organization, right? So of course, all kinds of categories or levels are approximations to reality. So they don't literally depict how reality is. So what you see in your organization will most likely not neatly fit into the categories or the levels always. So you might find yourself standing maybe between 2 levels, and you, the words, sorry, just to say this, the words of the slides don't have to be clear. So this is not to read the tool right now, and we will go into more details of the different knowledge management areas after this. So, so the levels are just approximations. So they're just giving you a rough guide to where you would find yourself. And you will have to note down for yourself, why are we choosing this? So at the end of the tool, you have a score table. And in that score table, you can add which level you think you are at for a particular area and why you think you're at this level. So you can comment on that. So we can move maybe to the next slide, and I will show you the difference, the different knowledge management areas. And we will walk through them one by one, but just to hear them once. So we have the roles and responsibilities. We have the strategic approach, or the strategy. We have awareness and capacity, systems and technologies, institutional memory, external knowledge, internal knowledge sharing, learning from successes and failures, and measuring the knowledge, the impact of your knowledge management. So those are the 9 areas, and we will now go into each and every one of them. And how we'll go about is that I will read out the first level and the top level, so that you really have an idea of the poles between which you sort of can rank yourself if you're using this tool. So maybe Wesley, if you can click again, please. Okay, thank you. So I think now the words should be visible, but you don't have to read all. So what the roles and responsibilities for knowledge management is really about is the questions of, are the roles defined and who assumes responsibility for it? What are the leaders doing? And is this knowledge management, is it captured in work plans? And are the resources available for doing this? Sorry, I'm just confused because someone is saying they are not seeing the slides. Could I get a brief feedback of whether you are seeing the slides?
Yes, we are seeing.
Yes, we are seeing.
Yes.
Yes, okay, all right. Then maybe this person can check again what's wrong there. All right, so on this roles and responsibilities, let's take a look at the level 1, which is the novice, so the beginner, the one that's just really started considering knowledge management. So the description here is, we have not yet defined roles and responsibilities for knowledge management. We lack senior leadership for knowledge management. So that's really the first level. Now, when you move to the level 5, so at the very other end of the scale, you will see that Roles and responsibilities for knowledge management have been defined for all staff. And then okay, sorry, we are having some issues, so 1 second. If you don't see the screen in full, make sure that you are on full. And unfortunately, I still see some people saying they don't hear me well. Unfortunately, it seems it's only a few who don't hear me well, and others can hear me very loud and clear. So I'm assuming it has to be on your side, unfortunately, of the network. So I can't really do anything about that right now. We are recording the session and we can share the session once again. So if you don't hear everything or it's a bit far, then maybe you can watch also those parts that you didn't hear well later on. So on the level 5, coming back to that, we have roles and responsibilities defined for all the staff. And then we have that senior leaders have taken responsibility for improving and supporting knowledge management practices across the organization. Knowledge management responsibilities are captured and monitored within individual work plans, and staff have the mandate and resources to fulfill their knowledge management responsibilities. So you see there's an increasing support by leadership for knowledge management, which is very important to keep in mind. So leadership has a very crucial role to play in knowledge management. And you, yeah. And then the other thing is that as your knowledge management gets more and more systematic, you will have a clear definition of who is doing what the responsibilities are. And this will not just stay at a point of assigning the responsibility, but really capturing it in the work plans and working according to it. So this is the first area. This is the area of roles and responsibilities. Let's move to the second area. If you have questions on one area, please note them down and we can come back to it after I've presented all the different areas, so that we first go into that. Excuse me. So yes, thank you, Wesley. So the knowledge management strategy is the next knowledge management area. And here on level 1, which is the novice level, we do not have a knowledge management strategy. So very simple, it's simply not there. And then on level 5, we have an effective strategic approach to knowledge management, which is integrated into our organizational strategy and practices, and all staff apply the strategy in their work routines. The strategy is reviewed, monitored, and updated on a regular basis. So what you really look at here is sort of, is the strategy there, and is it integrated into work routines, and is it being monitored and reviewed? And I want to throw in also some comments from experience that oftentimes organizations do not have a strategy on knowledge management ready, especially if you're starting out with it. You might not have that strategy, and that's okay. So having a ranking or such a maturity might give you the feeling that you would want to be the expert in everything, and maybe it's a bad thing to be just at a lower level, but rest assured that that's normal. So it's normal to rank low, and the important thing is not of what it looks like to outside, but really this is something for you to do internally. If you are very transparent as an organization, you can of course also share it, and there is no harm in this. But what it's really supposed to do is supposed to give you an actionable understanding of your knowledge management. So being at level 1, if that's really where you are, that's fine. Now you know that you're at this level and that there's something you can do about it. Maybe we can move to the next area, and that's awareness and capacity. And what this is about is, do staff know about knowledge management? At least all of you who are in this session now, you know something about knowledge management, but do all staff know about it? And how much do they know about it? Are there knowledge management champions in your organizations? And once again, what are the leaders doing? Are they driving it? Are they furthering it? And then what kind of capacity building is going on for knowledge management? Those are questions that fall under this. And the level 1 description is, our staff are not aware of knowledge management concept, methods, or tools. There's no one staff can turn to for support on knowledge management. Our leaders are unaware of the benefits of knowledge management. Then level 5, all our staff have a good understanding of knowledge management concept, methods, and tools, and apply them to their work. Designated staff, the knowledge champions, have as one of the objectives to proactively and systematically build staff capacity on knowledge management. And finally, our leaders drive knowledge management activities and model efficient knowledge management behaviors. I think I mentioned it last time, but there's no harm in mentioning it again, that what the leaders are doing really will reflect on what others do. So leading by example is quite important in knowledge management. So if you want people to save things in a certain way, then don't do it. There's little interest for others or little drive for others to do it. So that's why this leadership component comes back in. And something you might notice is that there's a cross-cutting between different categories. So it's not clear-cut, but we can see certain elements coming up in different categories. And that's also normal because it's integrated, and knowledge management cuts across so many different areas that we will have this different things like the role of leadership or the roles of staff popping up in different areas. So once again, also the areas are sort of just carved out for this purpose, but it's not a rule that they are like this, but it's just one way to sort of create a system and create some order for you to go through what you are doing in knowledge management. Now, in this awareness and capacity, what you see is from the level 1 to the level 5, and you're very welcome to read through all of this, maybe even outside the session, is you see an increasing awareness of all staff. You see a spread of the level of awareness. So there's not just widespread awareness of something about knowledge management, but you really have people who have a deeper understanding, who know tools very well, and who can help others and try to build their capacity. And you really have a leadership drive. So the higher you go, there's really that drive also from the leadership to push for this. I see a question here about the average level that an organization has achieved. And that's really hard to say because everybody, every organization is different. So as of now, this tool, not so many have used it, but it really depends. So I don't think there's an average level as of now that we can talk of with regards to this tool. And I don't think that's the important point right now to look at how do we fare with the average. But the first step should be how do we fare for ourselves, and then from there you can look outside. Let's go to the next area. I will answer more questions in once we have come to cover all the areas. Now, area 4, the systems and technologies. So here the questions are, how accessible is knowledge? Is it well documented and well stored? How fitting are the IT systems, and how well are they used, and how user-friendly are they? Let me read you the levels first. So on level 1, we have our IT systems and technologies meant to manage organizational knowledge are unused. There is no guidance on our IT systems. Documentation and storage are not encouraged or demanded. That's level 1. Now, level 5, there's very good user uptake of our well-fitted IT systems and technologies that meet the needs of our users. All our staff use our IT systems and receive sufficient training and support and guidance. We regularly monitor our systems and address gaps. we are able to quickly and easily find the documents, information, and knowledge we need to carry out our work. So what you see moving from the level 1 to level 5 is, for one, that the IT that is there is actually fit for purpose. So last session I mentioned the databases and how knowledge management started out of being about databases, and there was really a big praise about having a database. And it's wonderful to have a database, but if it's not answering any need by your staff and nobody is using it, then what is the use of the database? So to have an IT system, it should answer a need, it should have a use case, it should be for something, and it should make sense. But then also, whatever IT systems you have, you will need some IT support. So especially if you have maybe customized systems or you have specialized systems, you will need a guidance for staff, especially new staff, but also staff who are there to really help them use the tools and use them correctly. So that increases, that awareness that this is needed increases, and also how well it is fitted towards that. And then another thing on the final level, what increases is, for one, the monitoring of your own gaps and your own systems. So you critically look at your systems and think about, okay, does this work? And that's something that you might have to do on a regular basis to check in whether this tool is still used, especially also with all the technological advances. We will always find new tools, and we have to critically look at what does it offer us, and does it fit to what we want. And then finally, with systems and technologies, what they are supposed to do is they are supposed to make your work easier. So if you have something that really makes your work harder, then I wonder what the purpose is, right? So I know there are user-unfriendly software out there, and we need them, and then we have to struggle with them. But in general, the systems that you have, and this is outside of the IT systems, the filing systems that you have, maybe the reporting system that you have, all of that should really make things smoother and not make things more complicated and cumbersome, right? So that's where you have to look at it. Your systems should make knowledge flow in your organization easy. It should not cause blockages of knowledge flow, but it should make it easy for people to find what they need to know and to share what they have. Can we go to the next slide? We are now almost halfway through of all the areas. This area is the institutional memory. And the question here is, do you experience knowledge loss in your organization? How is the transfer of knowledge handled when staff, for instance, leave the organization? And do you use knowledge management tools for capturing knowledge and experiences? And so let me read out the different levels. Level 1 is, we do not have an institutional memory. We do not have any processes or tools in place to adequately capture and store knowledge. We frequently experience knowledge loss, for example, when staff leave, the knowledge leaves with them. And then on level 5, we have built our institutional memory with a formal knowledge capture and transfer process for all instances of staff changing roles or leaving. We strategically and systematically use knowledge management tools and processes to capture and share knowledge. We review the lessons learned from outgoing staff and seek to apply learning to inform future activities. We have found our own style for documenting strategic knowledge and experiences, and we do not experience serious knowledge loss anymore. So what you see here is, from the first level to the top level, let's say, you have a receding occurrence of knowledge loss. So less and less do you get to the point where you lose knowledge when, for instance, the staff is leaving. And that is because more and more you have processes in place to capture that knowledge, to tap into that knowledge. And remember maybe also the iceberg that we showed you, where you have that huge chunk of implicit or tacit knowledge, the knowledge that is not written down in, for instance, a report. that knowledge that you want to tap into. So doing that and doing that on a regular basis will prevent the knowledge loss at the end. Also remember the staff life cycle we have, where you enter the organization and then you leave again. And Petra mentioned there are tools for knowledge loss risk assessment, and there are handover procedures or transfer procedures at the end, the debriefing. And that's very important, but it's also important to keep in mind that it's an intense period, right? Petra pointed out that staff that are leaving are busy doing their job and they're busy getting those documents ready. So the more you pile towards the end of their stay at your organization, the more you might face the challenge that you lose out on something. So having processes in place throughout of how to capture the knowledge that your staff have can be very helpful in easing also the debriefing at the end. Yes, so let's move to the next level, and that is about external knowledge. So the question that with the capacity assessment you ask yourself here is, do we systematically address knowledge gaps? Do we even know what we don't know and what we need to know? And is it encouraged? Is it incentivized to learn from outside the organization? And let me read the levels for you to give an idea. On level 1, the novice level, we have not defined gaps in our organizational knowledge. We do not know what knowledge our staff need for their work. We do not prioritize or incentivize learning from outside the organization. And then level 5, we continuously identify and address gaps in our organizational knowledge. Learning from outside is an integral part of how our organization works. Learning brought into our organization is systematically documented and shared with colleagues. Our staff actively seek out relevant external knowledge and have specific goals for sourcing and capturing knowledge. We have developed a learning culture and allocate time, recognition, and resources to learning from outside. We reward and promote innovation and good practices in learning. Now, what you see here is sort of a prioritization of learning and an incentivization of learning. In the first session, we pointed out the connectedness between organizational learning or learning from outside and the knowledge management. So most of you, I think, have staff who are doing trainings, maybe some are even studying at university. And the question is of how much of, for instance, the trainings you send your staff to, are you retaining them in your organization? How much do they bring back into the organization? Because it is very well to build the individual capacity, and it can be great to encourage this and to help people do this by either giving them the time to do it, or by recognizing their efforts, or by even incentivizing it. But it is also important as an organization to consider, how do we bring this back? So how do we capture this again? So we come back to the question of how you capture the knowledge, right? How you make sure that what the staff are learning outside are brought back into the organization. And that is something that should not be left alone with the staff, because you might have staff that are very happy to share and that are willing to bring in a presentation or whatever, but others might not. And it's you, the organization, that should have certain procedures in place to make this easy, and to make this also something where the staff can get recognition for. So that's really the external learning. And knowledge management is really important to have those processes or the infrastructure in place to help the learning from outside to really come inside. Plus, what the knowledge management helps you to understand is where your gaps are. So identifying what you need to know to do your work, or what your staff need to know to do their work, is really so crucial to guide also what you want to learn from outside and what you want to retain. Now, level 7, or area 7, excuse me, is the internal knowledge sharing. Wesley, if we can move ahead one in the slide. Yes, thank you. So this internal knowledge sharing is about how actively staff in the organization are sharing their knowledge, and do you encourage them to do so? And how much transparency do you have in place, and how much space do you give for open communication and for sharing? So let me read the levels first. The novice level is knowledge resides in silos, meaning in isolation, in islands, with little knowledge sharing across our organization. Sharing of knowledge is done only on request and reluctantly, and staff feel sharing knowledge might be disadvantages for them. And then on level 5, we have put in place a formal knowledge sharing process and integrated it into our organizational practices. We have developed incentives and have defined spaces to encourage and reward formal and informal knowledge sharing. Our staff have clear responsibilities for knowledge sharing and regularly and proactively engage in it. We appreciate the importance of knowledge sharing, and we have fit-for-purpose systems for sharing and accessing knowledge across our organization. Now, what you will see if you go through all the levels is an increase in open communication, an increasing willingness of staff to share, and an increasing transparency. And that's something very crucial to keep in mind when you talk about sharing. So it's something that can be so desired, but then you have to understand what is preventing it, what is blocking it. And on the first level, we saw that some staff might feel it's disadvantages for them. And we always hear the saying, knowledge is power, right? And that can be precisely what makes people cling to their knowledge and not share it, because they feel if they share this knowledge, then why should they be still hired in the organization because they have given away their knowledge? So that can be a fear that people have, that they don't want to share. They don't want to let people know maybe their contacts they have someone. They don't want to let people know maybe also where they have failed. So they rather have someone else fail than admit to themselves that they at some point failed. Because there's that fear that if I admit this, maybe I get fired. Or maybe people will not look at me with the same respect. So it's very crucial to understand that sharing knowledge is also an element of trust. And that is transparency. One of the things I think behind transparency that we also need to keep in mind is the trust that if we are transparent, it is also okay. It is okay if there are mistakes in it. And we trust that the other side treats this, what we have shared, with respect and with the level of that is required. So having this, desiring this open communication, we have to keep this in mind. We have to keep in mind what is blocking people from it. And those should be things that when you look at these levels that you dig into and that you try to understand. So if you are at level 1, so what is blocking the people? And do remember that there's that organizational culture that is so relevant and so important in this as well. So hierarchy can at times also prevent, because maybe someone feels they are too low a level that it is not their place to say something. So all of this is important to consider, and is important when you use the tool to bring out and to understand more. But we will get into how you can bring this out. So that's something that after we have looked at the areas that we will discuss in more detail. And another thing that in this internal knowledge sharing that's to consider is whether there are the spaces for sharing, right? I think when it comes to the tools or the methods that you can use, one that also Petra presented last time was the meeting. So it might seem like a very simple tool, but is actually a very effective tool because it brings people together and it makes them talk to each other. But of course, we all have sat in very good meetings that went very well, and we have sat in meetings that were really, very burdensome. There was silence, people didn't feel like talking. So facilitating a meeting is not also a simple thing, depending on what you want to get out. If you just want a frontal sharing of information, then any kind of meeting can work. But to really get people to talk, you have to think about what do you want them to share, and is the setting of the meeting conducing to that, for instance. So maybe all of you are aware that a lot of sharing is happening when you're having your tea break or when you're meeting somewhere outside the office. That's when you start sharing things that you would never share in an official meeting. So also this, for the internal knowledge sharing, is important to look at. So what are the spaces that you currently have in place, that you are currently using for knowledge sharing? And what are maybe even the spaces where knowledge is shared that you didn't have in mind as a formal place, but where nevertheless in your organization, staff share what's going on. Okay, let's move to the next area, which is learning from successes and failures. And here it's really about whether you systematically reflect on your activities, the activities that you as an organization do, be it with beneficiaries or be it in your office. So do you reflect on what is going on? And do you capture the lessons that are learned? So if you do this, if you reflect on it, do you capture what comes out of that reflection? And very importantly, when we talk about failures, and it connects to what I just said, is there the trust to admit to a failure? And how much transparency is there? And then finally, how structured is this process? So let's look at the levels. So on level 1, we do not critically review and improve our practices, strategies, or objectives. If we reflect on our activities, we do it only on donor demand or demand from outside. And then on level 5, we have planned and structured reflection processes routinely take place for key areas of work. Lessons learned from reflection practices are used to shape and improve the future practice. We feel free and encouraged to acknowledge and learn from our failures. Our leaders lead by example and reflect on their own successes and failures. And reflection is really at the core of how we work. So what you see here is once again that openness and communication, that transparency and that trust that you can admit that something went wrong. And when you capture these experiences, it's not about the blame game of saying, oh, it was this person who did something wrong and then it was this one. It's really about, okay, something went wrong. And so how did it get there? And what can we change about the next time? What have we learned from it? Because the truth is we are all humans and we all constantly make mistakes. And the only way we got to where we are is because we made the mistakes. And at times it can be helpful though to let someone else know about your mistake, to stop them from doing it all over again and sort of reinventing the wheel. Because maybe eventually they'll also overcome it, but it will take more time. So as an organization, to not keep falling into the same pitfalls, it's helpful to look at that. And then to be able to do that, you need to encourage staff that it is safe to share their failures. It is safe to say, at this point, we didn't really get to where. And then to look at it and to use the tools that knowledge management can give you to dig into this and to understand and to learn from it. So that's really where knowledge management can come in. And what you see in this maturity level and where you would rank yourself accordingly is sort of how much of that open communication and transparency do you currently have in your organization? How much are experiences appreciated for the learning potential that they have? And how much of that reflective attitude, let's call it, so the willingness to reflect on your activities is there among staff and especially also among leadership? And how structured is the approach to it? So it is also important when you learn from failure that you take something out of it that you want to apply. So that's why on the level 5, we also have that emphasis on that is something that you use to improve the future activities. Now, finally, the last area is the measuring of the impact of knowledge management. And in this is really, do you do this? Do you monitor what you have the outcomes and the output of your knowledge management? Do you have a framework for this? And is there a willingness to also accept recommendations? So on the level 1, there is no processes or systems in place for monitoring actions to improve the knowledge management. And then on level 5 is we have a clear measurement framework and effective processes for all knowledge management activities. We have developed relevant and robust measurements and indicators for all strategic knowledge management areas that are updated regularly. We assess knowledge management as part of our organizational-wide monitoring and evaluation cycles. And finally, where shortcomings are found, recommendations are made to senior leaders, and these are acted upon with sufficient resources. So what you see is, for one, the availability of a knowledge of an M&E framework, a good framework, and then the effectiveness of it, the effectiveness of the monitoring. So you can have a framework, but then you don't apply it. So here's really about also the implementation is effective. And of course, that resources are available or are made available or are searched to then implement recommendations. And there's willingness to change. So monitoring is great, but without a willingness to accept recommendations and to change accordingly, it's just a mere exercise. So really, it's important to what comes out of it, also to consider it and to use it to build on your knowledge management. If you remember the knowledge cycle we had, there are all those things going on inside, and we roughly looked at this like, how do you identify knowledge? How do you create it? How do you share it? How do you apply it? But then you step out of that cycle and you say, okay, so how is this all going on, the activities that we are doing? And do they actually answer the needs that we have? So that's what we look at on this level 9, area 9. All right, so those are the knowledge management areas. Those are the level 1 and level 5 of each area that I've just shared with you. And before we go into how can you use this, so how would it actually look like to use this, what I've just read out to you, as an assessment, I would like to take some questions that have started to pop up in the chat. And if you have more questions, please feel free to share them in the chat now. So I'm starting from below. How to handle staff who are not interested to learn more than what is in their job descriptions? Well, I think staff motivation is a very delicate issue, and I think there's no clear answer to that. So there can be a lot of things that you can do to motivate someone. That is, you create incentives, or you give them recognition for it, or maybe you first need to understand sort of what is blocking them, and that could be with an assessment to get out to know why are they not sharing. So maybe the assumption here is, I don't want to step too close, but maybe the assumption underneath is that when we see staff not being very active, not going beyond of what they're asked for, that maybe they are lazy, or maybe they don't know any better. But maybe it's also something that is in the environment that's simply not encouraging them to do so. And it's very important when you deal with staff that everybody is a personality, and everybody sort of has their own tics and has their own way of how they work. And so that's important to recognize. And there might be things that work for everyone, but it could be helpful when you do an assessment and you find out, okay, it's at a low stage. Why is it at this stage? And what do the staff think could change it? So talking to people and asking them about what do you need to do this could be a way to start a conversation about this and to tackle this problem. Then we will share the notes of this, we will share the presentation of this session. You actually already have the tool out of which I've just been reading, so you already have this in your mailbox. So you can just take a look at it from there. Then we have the question of who is responsible for administering the capacity assessment tool. That is something I will get to in a second, so I'm pausing that question for now. Then the question is, how do I know where to search for knowledge that I don't have? So the first thing, the question would be, do you know what you don't know? So do you know what you need to know? And then if I take this as an individual, my general advice would be just Google it, because you will always find something there. But as an organization, it should be important that this is being shared, that they know what staff are lacking to do their knowledge, because maybe already that knowledge is with someone else in the organization, and you could simply ask this person. So I can't go into the details of how do I find knowledge that I don't have, but of course there are different ways to go about it, either of searching for yourself or working through experts, and having the knowledge management in place can give you a system inside the organization where you can more easily find knowledge. Wesley, could you help me scroll a bit up in the chat, because I saw there were some questions before I take the other ones. I think a little bit further, a little bit more and more. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, so the administering, we get into that of who should do the assessment. Then let's go down a bit. That's too much. Oh, wait. Okay, so there's the question on confidentiality. I'm not quite sure what you mean by confidentiality, or as to which particular area this was concerned with. So maybe you can, I think it was Eric who mentioned this, so maybe Eric, you can come back and tell us in the chat what the confidentiality was. In the meantime, let's look for the other questions. Yeah, we can go down now. So, yes, I can see a very clear link between knowledge management. Okay, yes, you can see a link between knowledge management and the M&E systems, right? And I think that's pretty much how it is, right? So there is that connection. I think knowledge management might be a little bit broader, so it's not just about the monitoring, but it's really also about setting up the processes. So ideally, the monitoring of your knowledge management is integrated into your existing M&E framework, and the knowledge management is integrated into your strategy. So the knowledge management that you do really builds up all the processes as well. So the software that you choose, the meeting structure that you choose, etc. And then the monitoring comes in because it helps you to look at that. So it should not be double work. So you should not be doing knowledge management on one side and then you do the M&E on the other side. So wherever it can be integrated, it should be integrated. I'm not sure it is so easy to answer on this very general level, but maybe this gives an idea that sort of knowledge management is bigger than just monitoring what you are doing in the organization, but it's really also about setting up the processes involved. Okay. Okay, so there's the question of, yes, so the willingness to change matters, and what do you do when there's no willingness to change from top management? And that is what we mentioned last time. You can use that guerrilla approach, whereby you have a small group that says, okay, this is interesting, this is relevant, so we will start doing things. And remember that in knowledge management, it doesn't have to be the most resource-needing activities. So deciding that even you in your own project, if you're the only one, that you want to start documenting things, you want to start capturing experiences, that can have a carry-on effect. And then from there, you can spread the word, and management might be changed if they see the effects of it. So if the management is not into it now, seeing successes of the knowledge management can help to convince management. So you then, if you are interested in it, you can then go ahead with the tool and then use the guerrilla approach. I'm not sure the next on more light on work planning is connected to this tool, so I will pause that question. Okay, so So, okay, there's a question on the confidentiality. Yes, so of course there can be information that you want to keep confidential. And of course, even in the most transparent organization, there will be things that will not be shared with everyone. So for instance, information on staff, that be their health or whatever, those are things, those personal information that you should keep confidential, even by law. So there are things that as an organization you have to keep confidential. Also maybe about your beneficiaries. And here's something also very important to consider. How confidential do you keep the information about your beneficiaries? And it depends on maybe which area you are working in, but then are organizations working in very sensitive areas of human rights? And then the question is, are your systems, your IT systems really secure to keep that confidentiality? And so I think transparency and confidentiality are not opposed, right? It's not when you are transparent, you share all the confidential information. But you have to have a clear line as to why something has to be kept confidential. There should be good reasons why things are confidential. Because they are maybe sensitive for a person, etc. So that's, I think, where you look at confidentiality. But there's no, once again, there's not one line as to you have to do exactly this or exactly that, but you have to define for yourself what do you want, what level of transparency do you want, and what are things that maybe you have kept them confidential, but where you don't see any harm in sharing them. And so that's, I think, the balance that each organization have to find in your particular context. Okay, I think those were the questions for now. We will have another round of the questions afterwards. So I would like to go into the question of how do you actually use this tool? And Wesley, if we can go to the next slide, please. So you can see 4 different options of how you can use this tool, but I mean, you can be as creative about it as you want. The basic way of applying this is you go through the different areas, you look at the descriptions, and then you define where your organization is standing. One way that you can do this is review by an expert. It could be one person, maybe the knowledge manager, or just one person who's taking up the issue, or maybe even a small team. They sit together and they go through this, and then they also interview other staff to find out from them what they think with regards to the different areas. Now, the strength of this kind of approach is that it is a quick process if it's only done with if it's only one person, or if it's a team, it's usually, it can be done very quickly. And then if it's done well, though, you have the interviews as well that will give you different perspectives. Because a weakness of this, having just one or a very small team do the review, is that you don't capture all the perspectives. So you might be losing out on something very crucial because it's not part of your work, or it doesn't happen in your department, but it's something that is very relevant for someone else and you didn't talk to this person. So not involving everyone has that challenge. Involving people again with interviews takes longer, and also you still have some sort of a bottleneck. So it's still one person who is analyzing the interviews or who is giving their own perspective. So those are weaknesses to consider with this. But as we just said, if there is no management support and it's not possible to use any other option, then at least you can do this as a one person, as a small team, to have an idea and to have looked at it more systematically. And already doing this can be one step towards gaining that management support. The next thing is sort of the desk-based assessment by a team. So you have a team unit, for instance, a department doing this, and whichever way they can do a workshop or they fill it out and then discuss about it. But what is to consider here is that this is usually better in bigger organizations. So once again, that huge corporation with thousands of employees and very many offices, it might be very helpful to break it down by departments, and each department might have very different needs. So let's say production might have a very different experience than sales. If you are a very small organization, then maybe the differences will not be too much. So you can, of course, still do it, but the differences might be smaller. And it also depends if the departments are very small and it's just one person, then it's really hard to have a dialogue if you're just one. Then there's another option that you can decide to do a survey. So you can do a survey out of this tool, you can put it even online, and that's usually a very quick way to go about it, and you can even have the results displayed very nicely. The big problem with surveys is that you don't have a discussion, so there's no discussion possible, so you would still have to think of a way of how you analyze the results and who gets the responsibility and the voice to interpret the results. So who will be that person to have that authority? And another thing is that you have little control over how people interpret the different things, how they interpret what they have heard. I'm by now very certain that from what I've said, everybody might have come up with a slightly different understanding of what this is. And so so that's something to keep in the back of mind always with surveys. So survey design tends to be a huge thing because you don't have that easy chance to ask the person, but why did you tick this box? And what did you understand about it? And so that's a bigger backdrop about doing a survey. And also what one has to consider is that surveys tend to have a bit of a lower response rate than if you have individual or direct interactions. Now, finally, another way that you can go about it is that you do a workshop. So you sit together, maybe even as the whole organization, and you have a workshop on this, during which all staff fill out the tool by themselves, and then you discuss about it. So you get the individual rankings, and then you provide examples of why you chose this. And these examples are really sort of the juice, or really the flesh to the bone that you want in this, because knowing that, okay, 5 people rank us at level 1 and 10 at level 3 can give you a medium, but then you still really have not too much of an idea of why you are standing there. So a workshop can be used to really bring out those stories and have people share the situations when maybe they don't feel encouraged to share, or the frustrations that they have, or they share what things are going so well. So maybe sometimes things are going on in the organization and a person is doing something which maybe you weren't aware, but that's something that is working very nicely and that can then be mainstreamed across the organization. So having this and getting to hear what everybody is doing and really digging into those details and those experiences is possible in the workshop and will be very beneficial for knowing where you are standing. And it will give that sense that to people that, for one, they have been heard, and something is also happening with this, and it will create ownership in the process afterwards. So that is an essential part. You have a foundation now for designing and implementing your knowledge management approach. And of course, this is something that you can do in a smaller organization. The bigger the organization, the more difficult this will be, right? So then you would have to see to send representatives or whatever, and then you also need to decide who would represent whom. So the bigger, the more complex also the knowledge management becomes. So that's something to keep in mind. But otherwise, this workshop to use this and go through it step by step together can really give you that deep insight into what is going on in your organization. Now, if we could go to the next slide, I want to share with you how we did this at the regional office of Herout 3000 here in East Africa. And we had the introduction, and we also had this tool, and we said we want to be one of the first ones to try it out, also that we and all our staff here know what this tool is that we are sharing with our partners. And we said, let's go for a departmental assessment. We have different departments that at times overlap, but at times not so much. So we wanted to understand how are they handling their knowledge management. And so we had these different assessments, and there were different ways of how people did it. Some had to do it on their own because they are sort of their own department, and others had a small workshop. I think another team had a one-day workshop almost. So there was really a bit of a difference of how the departments decided to do this. But that was fine because we said we will have a workshop for a combined results discussion, where all the departments already come with their assessment of what they have agreed for their different departments. And this was nice in that we could get all of this out, and we could actually see that there were some differences between departments. They were not huge, but still we could see there were some differences, and that was interesting to see. And we had some small repetitions as well. So the question is whether that was the perfect way, but nevertheless, getting it out and talking about it, and maybe better to have a repetition than to have something that is being lost or someone feeling that they were not able to share their voice. And so having smaller departments do this was also good in that everybody could more easily share than if the group gets very big. And then at the end, we had a session to sort of look at the vision, or look at what do we want to achieve with our knowledge management, and then to prioritize the areas that are relevant. In the beginning of this presentation, I said that through the assessment, you can also identify the prioritized areas. So what are the pressing needs? What do you really need to address? So what are things where sort of the pain that staff feel about it is so strong? So be it about sharing, be it about the documents, how much staff maybe are annoyed that they can't find something. So what are really the points that are very pressing, that are painful in some way, but also to consider what is strategically relevant. So when you do the assessment, I think there will be several points where you feel that you are not doing enough or that this is not good enough. And that's a normal thing. So I think whatever is there, there's always room for improvement. But the point also of having a workshop about the results of this assessment is to know what you want to do with it. So having the results is one thing, but then thinking about what can we do with this and creating an action plan is very important. And resources are limited, that is, time is limited, staff is limited, so you would want to focus on particular areas. And those should be the ones that are of strategic importance for your organizations. That means that help you achieve what you want to achieve anyway, and that address maybe at least one very pressing need, and maybe also include something that you realize you can very easily do, and by that create also more motivation for the process. So it's always good also to look at the quick wins, as they are called. So something that is easy to do, but will give that feeling of success. And we humans, we are somehow geared towards that, towards wanting to have success. So having a small, even a tiny success in the beginning can have a good point for the motivation. Can we have the next slide, please, Wesley? So what you see here is the results from what we did at the regional office, and I've made this into this chart, but there's very many different ways of how you could present the results. You can create a radar chart, maybe you can even do a painting. So it really depends on you, on your creativity. So there's no one uniform way, but it can be helpful to do this because it visualizes what was going on. It can be used as a reference point, and you can note down where you stand, why you think you are at this stage, and what maybe you want to do, what are things, ideas that already come up. So in the tool that we shared at the end of the different areas, we have that table where you can put in your ranking. And you have a part for commenting, which is very essential to know why you put yourself at a certain level. And then also there's one to say, okay, actions that could be done. And I would suggest to keep that part for after you've Yes, so our internet just kicked us out, but we are back. Are you still seeing the screen? I don't think you are seeing the screen. Can we do the screen sharing again? The basic. Yes, that one. All right. So having this sort of visualize of what came out can be very important. Also a process to reflect on what is there and what do you want to do. So I will not go into detail and into what we have here at the regional office, but I think something that you can see is that we are ranking ourselves quite low in some areas. And of course, this is a self-assessment, right? So that's important to stress. That's how our staff see ourselves and the office. And we decided that we are very willing to share this because this is where we are standing. So there's no harm in this to say, okay, we don't have this in place, but that is something that we can consider and that we can look into. So yeah, so I think that would be it in terms of the presentation. Maybe we can take some few more questions before we go into the breakout room. I think we can end the screen sharing now, we see, and then we want to see the questions. Yes, fine. So do we have questions? Unfortunately, it seems since we were kicked out, we cannot access the old questions that were there. So maybe if you have a question on the tool and on how to do a capacity assessment, please share your questions now. And maybe also something to say about the process while maybe some of you are getting ready their questions, is that it's not a rapid assessment, right? This is not about running through the assessment, but you can take your time to go through it and to identify this. And how you want to do it really depends on you. It depends on your organization, what works in your organization. And you can always get in touch with either me or Petra. So we have shared this tool and we are very happy to know how is it working, where are things maybe not working, so that we can also adapt the tool again. There's a question of how best to use the tool when developing the new strategic plan. So you can use this tool as part of the organizational analysis, right? When you do a strategic plan, you set about understanding how your organization is working, how effective things are, and doing this can be a very good part of knowing how you actually work. So it would be at the very beginning as you are gathering all the information about your organization. The slide and examples of results assessment. That slide, the last slide, was just to give you an idea of what a result could look like. So it was, we didn't want to go into all the details of it, but just to give an idea that you can visualize the results to see where you are standing, and then you can easily, if you do it again, compare yourself later than having to go through all the different stories, etc. again. No, exactly. On our results, we didn't reflect the different departments because we brought everything together. So we had the departmental assessment and we looked at it, but then we brought the results together to get an impression for the whole regional office. So as I mentioned, we didn't have too much differences between the departments, so it didn't warrant to have those different overviews. So for us, it was good enough to have one overview for the whole. But in other organizations, it could be different, and it could be that there is such a huge discrepancy between the two that combining them would somehow bring a mishmash that is not helpful. So that's something that you have to decide, and that you have all the creative space to decide how would you want this to look like? Okay, how do you include it in an already developed strategic plan? Well, there will be always times to review the plan, right? And to include the knowledge management in your strategic plan is you look at what do you want to achieve, right? What are your strategic goals? And then you look at what are you doing to get there? And can you tweak some things here or there to set you on a better track? You will not maybe have it included in it as such, but you can do that as you review the document. But for the meantime, while you have the plan is sort of your guidance as well. The plan gives you an idea of what your prioritized areas are, of what areas you should put more attention to. So the question is proper documentation and organization of information storage part of knowledge management? And the answer is a very big yes. So knowledge management is more than documentation, but documentation is an essential part because once again, remember that iceberg, and you had on top the explicit knowledge. So the knowledge that is written down. In your cases, this will often be reports. And so finding this information in a way that others find it easy to retrieve it is very important. But what we have tried to point out is that knowledge management, the way it is understood today, goes way beyond that and is really about also I must apologize for our internet, so we seem to be facing some difficulties right now. But I think we have answered the questions that were immediately there. So what I would like to do is to have a small brainstorming session. And for that, I would like you to, we will assign you to breakout rooms. For those of you who haven't heard of the breakout rooms yet, the breakout rooms are separate calls, let's say, within this one meeting call, where you will meet with other participants of this session. And we have 73 participants, so we should be having about 14 or 15 groups. So you will be automatically assigned. There will be a small window that pops up to ask you to join the breakout room. You will do that, and then we will bring you back into the bigger room after you have had your really mini brainstorming session. But I know there might be many things that are going on in your head, maybe other questions. And since we are this huge group of over 70 people, it will be very hard to have that direct interaction. So therefore, I would like to give the chance that you can discuss this in the breakout room, and we can take about 10 minutes for this. And the guiding question for this small breakout room is, how would I use this tool? So how, from what you've heard, would you use this tool? Would you like to use it? And how would you use this? So the question is, how would I use this tool in my organization? How would I use this? Would this make sense? And what would I do from the way that you've heard of how it can be used? So think about whether that works for your organization, could work for your organization, what you would hope from it, and how you would use it. Wesley, can we go to breakout rooms and we create them? Yes, so we think we do 15 rooms. That should be sufficient. All right, and you will now get an invitation. Yes, create. And we open them to join your breakout rooms. So please join your breakout rooms now. those who are still in the main room, you will have an invitation in front of you to join the breakout rooms. Many have already joined, so please join, and then the breakout rooms discuss. Wesley, could we broadcast a message to all? You are when you go onto the window of the breakout rooms, no, up and down a little bit at the bottom of that window, next to the red button, down, next to the red button. Yes. All right. So we just share the question with everyone. So can you type, how would I use this tool?
How do I use this tool?
How would I use this tool? Or just right in front, the question is, how would I use it? Or the assignment is, how would I use this tool? Because maybe not everybody was there.
It's enough.
Okay, and broadcast it. Okay, can we scroll through to see how we are doing? I think maybe you can even mute us for now. Down, and we just stay briefly. It would go either from down, breakout in 15, or we can just press ask to help. Okay, join that breakout group. Yes, hello. Stella. I think someone in your room requested for assistance.
Hello, am I with Stella, Martha? In my breakout room, I'm not able to get the member.
You're sorry, you're not able to get
The member.
the member?
Who is my group member? Yeah.
You're not seeing them. Everybody in the breakout rooms, you can unmute yourself and then you can talk to each other. If you're not seeing the other participants, it's maybe because they're not talking, or you could click on the view settings that you have in your Zoom. So you should find the setting where you have gallery view, then you can see the others in your group.
Okay then, thank you.
Okay. All right, I think we'll figure it out, so we can leave the room on the right. No, sorry, down at the very end of our computer, on the right, yes, to the right.
Yeah.
No. Do you see on the very right corner the button leave room?
Yeah, this one.
Okay. Great. Next to it. Yeah. Oh, it's okay. All right, maybe we can send a message to everyone that they unmute themselves to talk. broadcast to a message to all, like we did before.
This one.
No, in the window. Yeah.
Yeah.
So to talk, please unmute yourself. Let me see how it goes on. We just enter some groups and see. We will mute them. Is someone still in the main room, by the way? Yeah, to talk. Please unmute yourself to talk in the breakout room. So we can admit someone was kicked out again. Okay, let's try and join room number 1, just this on the right. Yes.
Systems and other systems as well. There are other referencing systems, for example, that exist in our organizations. Like when you're writing a letter outside, you're supposed to use certain codes for references. So we intend to use it in that way. Thank you.
Can you increase?
Thank you, Samson. I'm not sure if anybody else wants to share. I can see Annika is already in the room, so I'm not sure if she's, I'm a bit confused with her being present.
Maybe she's part of us.
Or maybe we should be going back. I don't know, that's something I'm a bit confused, but yeah.
We can request to hear from her. She's trying to communicate to someone there.
Okay. Thank you, Samson, for sharing. I think the last person should be Fadila Kateta.
Thank you. Yes. Hello, you requested my assistance? You all have to unmute yourself so that you can talk to each other. So you are currently muted. You'll have to unmute yourself. Usually when you go in the task at the bottom of your screen, the option of a mic, there should be a microphone that you can unmute yourself, and then you can talk to each other.
I've done it.
Yes, perfect.
Thank you.
Okay. You don't have really so much time. Have you had a chance to talk to each other or not yet?
Not yet. I'm not seeing my other friends.
Okay, that could be also the issue of how you are looking at your Zoom. So if the others talk, they should be popping up, but you can also change the view setting to gallery view, and then you would see all.
You gave me Fred, Joyce. Yes, Joyce. Yeah, Joyce.
Yes.
Hello.
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 Yes, Joyce. Nice to meet you.
All right, let me give you.
Me too.
Yeah, I was trying. I was not connecting with you. At least I have you.
Let me leave
Yeah, I think it is a technological problem.
It is. It is clear now.
Yes, you requested our help. Yes, I'm in your room. You have to unmute yourself. So usually you see that microphone button on the left corner. So unmute yourself. If you have been muted the whole time, then you just probably didn't even see each other and didn't know how to talk to each other. So, was this the question? Okay, I don't really hear you. Okay, we are coming back to the main session anyway. So you will have time next when we do another session. Maybe Wesley, we can leave the room. So I'm seeing some of you are back in the main room already. I think when you are being kicked out by your internet connection and you enter the main room, then you don't enter the breakout rooms again. That's a bit unfortunate. It's also the first time we are using this feature, so we are just learning about this. I still hope you had some chance to talk, and we are also bringing all the other ones back now. So this was really just maybe a teaser. So I think we can close all the rooms now. We should give them the time to the prompt to come back. So we are bringing everyone back to the main session now. So they have been asked to rejoin. And we will be here. Wesley, maybe we can start sharing the last PowerPoint slide again, if possible. So
This one.
And then we go on the final slide. We have to click 1, 2, 3, and then yeah. Okay, now let's see if everybody is coming back. We have a few more seconds before everybody will be back in the main room. I'm seeing our connection is unstable again. And can you help me bring that screen, the breakout room,
This one.
so that I see where in the center? Okay, so I think everybody should have joined back. So I hope there's a thank you for that. I hope you had a small chance to discuss a little bit. I know it was a very packed session with a lot of me talking. And I know some of you are maybe not aware yet or just got to know the breakout room feature, so it was all a bit new. And also that some were struggling as we were with the internet connection. So just take it as a teaser. You can still reflect on the question as to how you would want to use the tool in your own organization, whether you would want to use it and whether it makes sense. And you are most welcome, as I said, to get in touch with me or Petra to talk about it. So that at least you take something out of this, even if in your breakout room the discussions was not too lively. We will have more breakout rooms in the next sessions. So I think today was really you getting also acquainted with this tool. What I would like to do, because we are now already past time, I would just like to have a very quick feedback from you as to how the session went, the feeling that you go out with from this session. And Wesley, if you could help me open the chat, I'd like you to type an emoji in the chat where that describes how you are coming out of the session. And please type it, but don't send it yet. So type it, and at the word go, when I say go, you can all send in your emojis so that we'll get them all at the same time. So think about one emoji or even several emojis of how you are feeling leaving this session and type it in the chat. Don't press send yet. Press send as I say go, and let's have like maybe a minute to do that. The emojis should be, you can't see emojis. Zoom doesn't have emojis in the chat. If you don't click on the chat, maybe if you don't see the emojis in here, then you can copy them from somewhere and post them in there. Okay, there are no emojis in there, so then use the emojis that you know, or just type what you're feeling right now is. So either a smile or maybe a frown. Just type an emotion that you go out. So someone is clapping their hands. So thank you for that. All right, and yes, just send in your emojis. Just go all your feelings right now. All right, this looks very nice. I see a lot of smiles and happiness. Thank you very much. Please just send what you have. And as these are coming in, I'd like to thank you for being here today, for joining this session with me, and I hope you got something out of it. As I said, I know it was very much, but please, you have the tool, so you can take a look at it in more quiet, and maybe if questions come up, then feel free to ask them. And so I'm very happy that you have the time today, and I thank you all for being here, for also persevering through our few small internet hiccups, and I'm happy to see you again in 2 weeks for our third session, in which we will look at experience capitalization. So I know you're all eager to know what you can do in knowledge management, and the experience capitalization is one way, and I am also very happy that we will have a special guest next week. So one of our partner organizations who has already done experience capitalization with our tools will be there for a small Q&A session. So I'm very excited about that session, and I'm happy to see you all then in 2 weeks' time. Thank you very much. Thank you also for the great feedback, and I wish you all a pleasant day, and see you again in 2 weeks' time. Wesley, maybe Wesley can also still show his face one more time, because he has been behind the whole day active.
Hi everyone, nice to meet you all, and meet you again next time.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh.
Wesley, so yes, feel free to leave.
Another one.
All right.
Time up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank
You. I think we meet.
We can end that.